today I'm just going to give you a brief overview of our research into how maybe this illicit or unauthorized reproductive behavior in oysters may be causing mass mortalities of farmed oysters in Virginia. A little background first. The oyster aquaculture industry in Virginia, as many of you know, is booming and growing and has now become a very important part of the economy and ecology. And as farms are successful, they've grown, and this is what a medium-sized farm can expect in annual revenue. But in 2014, the unexpected happened, and this is what those farms had in revenue. And that was because millions of oysters across the Chesapeake Bay died during the summer of 2014. So investigating what the factors are in causing those deaths are very important for these farmers, and a primary suspect of that, as I mentioned, is this reproductive behavior. So largely speaking, there's two types of oysters grown in aquaculture. The first one on the left here is a fertile oyster, and you can tell because of the visible gonad there that's outlined in red that's filled with eggs or sperm. Every summer, these oysters spend a lot of energy producing those eggs or sperm. The other type of oyster on the right here doesn't have that visible gonad and doesn't have any eggs or sperm. That's because it's sterile. This oyster is sterile because it has 3 sets of chromosomes. Sterile oysters are much more popular, and now 90% of the 40 million oysters farmed in Virginia are sterile. So what makes these sterile oysters so popular? Well, for farmers, stopping sex in oysters has a lot of advantages. For one, sterile oysters often grow faster. And two, they don't have to transform their body tissue into eggs or sperm, so they have a higher meat quality year-round. Lastly, because these oysters aren't going through the reproductive processes, we would expect these sterile oysters to be less stressed during the warmer months. But recent events have challenged that notion that sterile oysters are more relaxed during the summer months because of what I mentioned before, of these mass mortalities that happened in the summer of 2014 that affected many farms on the eastern shore. Farmers there lost in the range of 50% to 85% of their stocks. The common link among these farms is they were all exclusively growing sterile oysters. So scientists at VIMS responded immediately to this and collected surviving oysters from those affected farms. And what we expected to find when we opened those oysters was something that looked like this. But instead, we saw this. We found a surprisingly high rate of these oysters that had visible gonad and were filled with eggs. This doesn't seem like a coincidence, and perhaps this is evidence of a connection between this unusual reproductive behavior in supposedly sterile oysters and this mortality event. If so, we need to do more to investigate why this behavior is going on. For one, is it environmentally or genetically controlled? In order to answer that, we need to create different genetic groups of oysters, and we need to deploy them to different sites of the bay. So oysters from different climates likely have different genes. So to produce these genetically different groups, we use parents from Virginia, Louisiana, and Maine. And we created 4 groups of sterile oysters. Remember, they have 3 sets of chromosomes, so this figure just shows here the genetic contributors to those 4 groups. And then we also had 4 fertile groups of oysters. We've deployed all of those oysters to 3 commercial farms on the eastern shore, as well as a site on the Rappahannock. And as my friend will tell you here, we've figuratively set a trap to catch the right genetic and environmental conditions that cause these mortalities. Starting this spring, we're going to check the oysters for our trap for their condition, survival, and of course, their reproductive behavior. The results from this study will have immediate practical applications for members in the oyster industry. Most farmers can't bear to have another summer like they did in 2014. As one member of the industry put it, this is a matter of the viability of the oyster industry. So working alongside farmers, we hope to find the factors that contributed to this mortality so we can prevent them from happening in the future. Thank you very much.